Hey everyone, this is Paul, otherwise known as the Catholic Nintendo Nerd, or right here, in case you don't know what I look like. And I'm going to reintroduce you to Dan and Evelyn, the ever-popular ENFP couple that's graced 3 of my videos so far, possibly 4 if I can upload our sword fights from this afternoon. And so we're here to talk about the Myers-Briggs personality types and how, being ENFPs themselves, and myself being an ISTJ, how we can relate to Jesus, who is typically typed as the INFJ, which means he basically leads with introverted intuition. He was really good at perceiving people. You know how whenever the Pharisees would be challenging him, it said he perceived in his spirit that something was off. So why don't we start with that, so I don't go on the super long monologue and just have you looking at the camera doing nothing. So, would you say that being dominant intuitives yourself, except you're extroverted intuitives, would you say that you ever, would perceive in your spirit that something is off in your prayer life, or you would need to find a better way to approach things?
Yeah. Can you explain the difference between that being introverted and extroverted, though?
Okay, so introverted intuition is more about finding more realistic possibilities. Like, for instance, they might take something from their past and something from their present and then, relate it. But extroverted intuitives is typically more outside the box type of connections. So it might be like seeing a bunch of bottles in the recycle bin and saying, let's make a fort out of this, or seeing all this firewood over there and saying, let's burn it all and create an inferno, and then it'll be like the fires of hell, something like that.
Oh, that sounds like me.
Like creative type of intuition. So, would you say that helps extroverted intuitives, the more creative ones?
Okay. And how does that help in our prayer lives?
Yeah, would you say that helps you get closer to Jesus in any way?
I would say that my conversion is a big part of it is Lord of the Rings, and somehow having the fantasticness of Middle Earth and that wonder, I found that in Catholicism in reality, and that was a big part of bringing me deeply into the church. And would that be extroverted intuitivism?
Sort of.
Sort of.
I mean, Jesus did like to talk in parables.
Yeah.
Which was probably a little bit of introverted intuition. He was able to connect these difficult concepts of the church and then relate it to something that everyone could relate to. Like, he could relate growing in faith to a mustard seed.
Yeah.
See, that sounds very creative, though, to me. And you said that he was introverted intuition, and we're extroverted intuition, and that's the creative one. But I like Jesus is probably the most creative person ever with the kind of responses he came up with, So, how is he introverted intuition?
Well, probably because most of the connections he made were inside his mind. You know how it would say that he would go off and pray, or he would perceive in his spirit.
So maybe less spontaneous, more meditative?
Probably, yeah. That would be my way of guessing. I mean, obviously Jesus didn't conform himself to just one personality. He perfected himself. He didn't allow himself to say, well, I'm an INFJ, so therefore I have to act like this all the time.
So I can act in any way that I like.
Yeah.
So you can debate and be the debater.
Yeah, definitely. So, would we relate to his intuitiveness if we have different functions?
I mean, you guys do have completely separate functions than the INFJ. Fun fact, me being an ISTJ, I also have completely different functions.
So you have the same as us.
I do have the same as you guys, but in reverse order. So, where you're weak, I'm strong, and vice versa.
Okay.
So, in my case, extroverted intuition would be my bottom function, which means, being born and raised Catholic, I find it difficult to accept any other type of religion unless I have the evidence to support it, which is, my dominant function, introverted sensing, that need for evidence and tangible data.
How do you think that your type, do you want me to hold the camera, and how do you think that your type...
Okay, sure.
What's the common ground that allows your type to build that foundation and with
I would
Jesus?
say that my type, we like evidence and we like facts. So when we learn about the historical reality that Jesus was a real person, he actually walked the earth, and he knew how to use like concrete, tangible logic to make his points. Like my dad pointed out that he uses what's called the Socratic Method, where he would ask questions that he knew his audience already knew the answer to, but it would be in a way of getting him thinking. And that's
Yeah.
the type of reasoning that a lot of ISTJs really appreciate. He also had a plan, and he didn't really do stuff on the spot. He always had this backup plan, and I think I appreciate that.
Huh. What do you think about that, Evelyn?
About what?
What if like if you relate to the Socratic Method of Christ and his time, and what kind of things does he say to us?
I just think that's really cool that, that Greek culture, he used what the people knew at the time to come and meet them where they were at. He used like some of the best that culture had to offer to do it. It's really cool.
Yeah.
I think that the images that Jesus gives of like just simply saying "I am the good shepherd" has so much power to me. Just seeing him in a big green pasture holding the sheep there.
Well, that actually goes really nicely into the next function, which would be extroverted feeling, which in Jesus's case, he had this intuitive grasp of like what people needed and what would create the most harmony. And so it would often say like he was moved with pity, or he was deeply troubled in spirit, and then that would be a basis for taking action. So now you guys do have introverted feelings. That's a little bit different, but introverted feeling it's usually more focused on morals and like subjective inner feeling, as opposed to always wanting to look at the harmony of things. So do you find yourselves ever personally relating to Jesus and like he comforts you, he creates this moral standard, examples like that?
I think that looking at how Jesus, say he's in a situation and what does he consistently do in those situations, gives me a standard to follow. All the times when you realize how tired he was, but he kept healing thousands of people, creates a standard for me to follow. And like you talked about with the introverted feeling with the morals and stuff, chapter 5 of the Gospel of Matthew's always been really big for me, because it's like just guideline after guideline after guideline about how to live. Is that, I think that's about what she asked? Does that answer the question?
I think pretty much.
Okay.
Like he would often push aside his tiredness for the sake of the good of the people.
Yeah.
And that's a good showcase of his feeling function. What about you, Evelyn? Do you relate to a lot of the emotional responses of Jesus, like his compassion, his empathy?
Yeah, I think when I see people hurting, even if I've had a rough day, I usually don't even talk about it, and I just be there for that person. And I'll be like, I'll talk about my issues another day, like, it doesn't matter, So I do, even when I'm tired, forget about that.
How fascinating. I would say that I know for an ISTJ, there you go. I would say for me that the ISTJ's feeling is tertiary, which means it's not exactly go-to, but it's still there. It's tertiary introverted feeling. So I would relate to the fact that Jesus had a standard for morality. Like, he would say, I have come not to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. And he would say, you have heard that it was said in ancient times that these were the rules, but I say to you these rules. And then they don't necessarily get rid of the old traditions, but they perfect them. And I've often said that about liking video games in general, how some of my favorite video games are those that don't try to revolutionize the series per se, but they perfect it. And in that case, I can see a lot of likability in Jesus' character with those kind of standards. And the fact that he knew how to draw out the best in people. Because a lot of times I find that if I'm getting highly emotional, then I like it when people that are more emotionally in tune can draw it out of me and get me to realize what I'm feeling. And Jesus did that with the woman at the well, where he, like she said, he taught me everything I know.
Yeah.
And I think if I were the woman at the well, which she probably was my personality type too, I would have really appreciated him being there.
Yeah.
So what about moving into the tertiary function, which for you guys would be extroverted thinking? That's the need to process logical thoughts out loud, the need to, like, you know, have timetables, graphs, the need to basically externally process logic. Would you say that you relate to Jesus in that way? Because he would have had tertiary introverted thinking, meaning that his plans weren't always broadly announced to the public. Like, he often talked very cryptically, hardly ever gave a straight answer.
It's very unrelatable. It's the exact opposite of me. Like, you never see Jesus being like, well, first I should maybe do this. Oh, wait, no, I gotta do, like, you know, he doesn't know. He just knows, and it's all in there. But if I don't project it, bounce it off of people, then rearrange it, like, all being publicly, visibly seen, then it's, you know, that's how I do things. It's not how he did things. So it's kind of hard to relate, because, I mean, it just seems like he just knew. And I'm like, really? I have this complicated process I have to figure everything out using, but Jesus just knows. I mean, he was also God, but...
I think it maybe helps us, like, we're so uncertain, we're so flaky, then ENFPs feel like we're flaky all the time, like we don't have any solidity, and to have, like, Jesus so close, who is so solid, can be maybe we can look at what he would do to find what he is doing in us, and let his life be maybe a standard for us to follow. And so, like, even though he's not like us in that area, maybe, like, we could
It could be...
still follow him in that area and still, like, interact with him.
Would you say it's like a goal that you could strive towards?
What's that?
A goal that you could strive towards, to, like, have that confidence of, like, Jesus had a plan and he executed it despite that the stakes were literally his life.
Yeah, it could be like a guide that says, like, looking at what he did have can tell us what he does have in our life right now, but the solidity that he had then, you know, he has that solidity for us.
Yeah, I don't think the way, because, like, Jesus probably is a little bit different from normal people, and that he already knew what, maybe he did have to think out a plan, but, like, at the same time he was God, so, like, he probably already kind of knew the plan from the beginning. So I think it's a little bit different. Like, a normal INFJ, they're going to be going through the same process that we are. It's just all in their head, you know? Which there might be some pros to that, like, they're not, like, constantly checking with other people, which might annoy other people, but at the same time, I see that there's still benefit for our personality type, the way we plan. You know, reaching out to other people can be helpful, so I think there's a lot of good to it. I just think it might be a little bit different for Jesus, who, when he knew who he was as a child, he knew.
Yeah.
Well, he did have to learn some things, as the scriptures did say he grew in wisdom and in stature, so... You know, Joseph had to...
his planning?
I don't know, but I'd like to think that he had obedience to his parents, so he probably had this backup plan in his mind of, well, if my parents are going to tell me what to do, then despite the fact that I'm God, I have to practice humility. Probably something along those lines crossed his mind at some point.
Yeah, I just wonder, like, we plan things, but ultimately, like, God has a plan. And so, what we should really be doing is trying to adhere to his plan. Do we have to plan how to adhere to his plan? Like,
Yeah, I think that with Jesus, right, he was obedient unto death, and his obedience is what his plan is I'm going to be obedient to where God leads me.
So is this a function that we don't need to use as much as we do because we should be more submissive to God and not trying to plan our own way?
Well, in that case, I would say that that's really fitting your type a lot, because ENFPs don't typically like to adhere too strongly to a plan. They like to observe and then act. So I would say that that could be a great way to trust in God more because you guys prefer spontaneity over planning.
Yeah.
And just let me be led by you.
Yeah, like you could say, okay, Jesus, I'm cool with your plans. Let's just go with it, kind of thing.
It's a lot of times it's like, you know, we look for some kind of a. Well, I think first place, if there's 3 places, first place is I'm going to try and figure stuff out. And that doesn't go well for ENFPs. Then second place is, okay, God, give me this sign. This is exactly what I'm looking for in your sign. I'll be ready in, 12 hours. I'll be standing outside. Give it to me then, preferably in a cloud. That'd be great.
What?
And then,
A cloud?
Just like we try to dictate what kind of signs he can give us. And
Well, I mean, that has traditionally been a sign of the Holy Spirit, so.
yeah, so give us that, exactly what we're expecting. And then the third thing is just let it happen and what God does in that.
Well, since we're nearing the 16-minute mark, let's move on to the bottom function before this camera shuts off on me. So, the bottom function for an ENFP would be introverted sensing, which is typically a function that governs like memory, facts, and like tangible evidence for reality. So, we obviously know that Jesus was an extroverted sensor, and so he typically did a lot of things with his hands. Like, he was a carpenter. He needed to have that, like right now, see this table? An extroverted sensor would need to touch it and feel it out to sort of figure out that it was there. Whereas I think in the case of ENFPs, if they were to use their sensing, it would be through, like, memories, data. Like you were saying, concrete signs. Like you said, come in a cloud.
Uh-huh.
So that would be an example of introverted sensing, however limited it is. So would you say that on the rare occasions when you guys do use introverted sensing, would you say that you can relate to Jesus, or do you need to be more like hands-on like he was, where he would like spit in the clay and then smear mud in people's eyes, or do you think you don't need that much proof?
I don't know what I do or don't need, but I can think of myself liking things to be tangible as well, even though that's not supposed to be my function. Like, I feel like I learn better when I'm doing things tangibly.
Huh. I never liked any hands-on activities in school.
No.
Yeah, I was always annoyed with that.
Yeah, I didn't really like finger painting that much most of my life.
No, I mean just do it yourself. Like, if you're watching how to solve a kind of problem, you don't really know it until you've done it yourself. That's what I mean. Like.
Okay.
Well, I know for, I guess turn the camera on me briefly.
Sure.
I know for ISTJs, because introverted sensing is my dominant function, we do need to be explained how to do things. So like a detailed instruction manual or someone that can tell us step by step how to do things. I think that's what's great about the catechism, because Jesus wasn't exactly the best at giving straight answers, and so the catechism and the priests and the magisterium clarify what he was saying so that we can arrive at the conclusion that he meant to convey, but couldn't just say it out loud because he knew that the magisterium had to do it. But in the case of the ISTJ, my bottom function would be extroverted intuition, which means I'm not too great shakes at thinking about the future or like accepting of new ideas. And I think that really helps me in my relationship with Jesus, because he, like I said before, he didn't come to abolish the law or the prophets. He came to fulfill it. So to a certain extent, he had a respect for the tried and true, which ISTJs like. Mm-hmm. And so as a result, I find myself admiring the fact that he doesn't expect too much change, that he likes order and stability, which is really cool for me.
That's really cool. I think I was just going to say that I think the reason he didn't give everything spelled out was because he didn't want, if people didn't want to hear the truth, they wouldn't hear it from him, you know.
Yeah.
And he spoke in parables so that people would hear but not understand.
Right. Well, as much as I'd love to continue this, we are at the 19-point mark. So if you have any catchy catchphrases to say to the audience, now would be a great time to do so. So, Evelyn, we'll start with you, put you on the spot. Do you have some cool, awesome catchphrase you want to say to the audience to close this off?
Hey.
Jesus
Dan?
loves you.
And put the camera on me real quickly.
Okay.
So, thank you for watching, guys. Let me know if there's any other group videos you want me to try doing. And until then, keep the faith, stay epic, and God bless. And cut.